High-level used nuclear fuel. What is it? How much is there? What can we do with it? By Brian Hajic and Stephen Arndt. Options. Don't produce it. Not a practical option. Store it on site. Current U.S. practice. Store it off-site. Proposed options being considered. Long-term burial. Politically rejected in U.S. Reprocess and reuse it. Employed in France and other countries. Previously proposed and rejected in U.S. Being considered again in U.S. and Korea. Produce less through newer technologies. Being studied for current and new design reactors. Options. We will be using a number of physics terms that will be familiar to many, maybe all of you. Some will be new to you. We will not explain them all during this presentation, or we won't get to the heart of the subject. So, we will have slides to explain them all that will be hidden during the presentation, but will be in the slide set posted on the GUYS Group website. What does IT look like? IT is known as nuclear waste IT, is not waste, scientific, engineering, economic opinion. IT is used, spent nuclear fuel. IT is full of available energy. Typical NPP site, North Anna in Virginia, 2-unit early generation Westinghouse plants. Commercial operation in 1978 and 1980. Each plant produces about 900 megawatts electric, uses lake water for cooling. Current licenses expire in 2058 and 2060, each having two 20-year life extensions. Boiling water reactor, BWR, early design. Late generation, GEBWR, and large design Westinghouse plants. Pressurized water reactor, PWR-TMI design. PWR core views. Uranium oxide ceramic fuel pellets, UO2. PWR fuel assembly or element or bundle. PWR fuel assembly. New fuel is uranium. Natural uranium consists essentially of two isotopes. Only 0.7% is the isotope U-235, which is the isotope of uranium used to produce power, released energy. This small percentage is not high enough for power production in U.S.-designed light water reactors. So it is enriched to a U-235 content of about 5% today. The rest of the uranium in new fuel is U-238. Important to remember, and we will come back to this. What is used nuclear fuel? A new reactor core is fueled with a full supply of this enriched uranium at what is known as the beginning of life, BOL. After about 12 to 18 months of use, the uranium-235 content has been used, burned, and has fallen to a level that will not support continued operations. This time is known as end of life, EOL. This 12 to 18-month period is known as a fuel cycle. Some of the fuel will have fallen to as low as 1% enrichment or less. About 1/3 of the total of the fuel is removed and replaced with new fuel. After 3 fuel cycles, the entire core will have been replaced and all of the removed fuel is now used nuclear fuel. What is used nuclear fuel? Generally known as, or called, nuclear waste, it is used or expended fuel from operating nuclear power plants. Arguably, it is not waste. Fuel must be removed from operating NPPs when it can no longer sustain a nuclear chain reaction. Fuel consumption in the reactor. Fuel in reactor for 4 to 6 years. Uranium-235 consumed. Fission products and transuranics produced, Pu-239, is a transuranic. What is in used nuclear fuel? A considerable amount of remaining uranium-235. A considerable amount of plutonium-239. Pu-239 is produced from the 95% of new reactor fuel that is U-238. Pu-239 at EOL is actually producing as much as 30% of the power output. Many radioactive elements, fission products, resulting from uranium nuclides splitting. Being radioactive, they emit a lot of energy over time, some over a short time and some over a long time, these times being known as half-lives. The emitted energy is manifested as heat that must be dissipated or removed to prevent the fuel and its cladding from getting hot enough to melt. Our second question, how much is there? How much used nuclear fuel currently exists and how much will there ever be? Can answer using two metrics. First metric, and the most published, is mass, or weight. It's a scary number. Currently, about 90,000 metric tons stored at 75 nuclear power plant sites in 33 of the United States. Another 2,000 metric tons is produced every year. Second metric is volume. I'll take credit for popularizing this metric in my classes at The Ohio State University in the post-Woody Hayes era of Ohio State football. What volume of used nuclear fuel is there can be answered by some simple math that we can all do here. The name of the Ohio State Stadium is Ohio Stadium, which is also commonly referred to as the Horseshoe or the Shoe. It is located in Columbus, Ohio, and serves as the home venue for the Ohio State Buckeyes football team. Let's do the math. The basic core volume. Typical nuclear reactor core is a right circular cylinder like a large Campbell soup can, 12 feet high and 10 feet in diameter. Volume equals height times area of the circle, PR squared. V equals 12 times 3.14 times 5 squared, equals 942 cubic feet. This is the volume of used fuel produced about every 3 years from one operating nuclear power plant. Remember, 1/3 of the core is replaced every year. Original design life of a whole reactor plant was 40 years. Through reliable maintenance, this is being uniformly extended to 60 years, and more recently to 80 years. Another topic, the economics of life extension. Let's use 60 years, and we can extend the argument later. Let's do the math. The total volume over a 60-year plant life, there will be 20 core volumes of used fuel produced. So each reactor over a 60-year life will produce 20 times 942 cubic feet. Total lifetime used fuel volume equals 18,840 cubic feet. Sounds like a lot. Assume 100 operating reactors and we get 1,884,000 cubic feet. Put this in Ohio State football perspective. A football field is 100 yards plus two 10-yard end zones long by 53 yards wide. Total area of 57,240 square feet. Pile all the used fuel produced by all the operating reactors in the United States onto the University of Michigan active football field, and the stack will be about 33 feet high. How much is there? Total produced volume from 100 nuclear power plants operating for 60 years is about 2 to 3 yard lines tall on the football field of your favorite rival. Okay, that's the fun. But what do we actually do with it? Need to look at several issues. First is design of the fuel itself. Second is the rate of decrease of residual energy production and the resulting heat produced over time by the fuel materials. The point here is that once discharged from a reactor core, the used fuel is still very radioactive, which means it is still producing a lot of energy that needs to be dispersed safely. Third is protection of the fuel from melting, also known as maintaining the integrity of the fuel structure to assure permanent containment of the radioactive materials, and thus to protect the environment and the lives of workers and the public. Progression from reactor core to final disposition at end of life. Fuel is very radioactive, means it is producing a lot of heat. First step is to move it to a storage pool with a heat removal system. Leave it in the pools for about 5 years. After about 5 years, the used fuel can be and is moved to dry cask storage. The large casks provide shielding from the radiation. Heat removal is by convection, needing only airflow. Eventual final disposition is probably to deep geological burial. On-site spent fuel storage. First step, wet storage in pools. Next step, Dry storage, air cooling. Used nuclear fuel storage. How used fuel is currently stored. Spent nuclear fuel is currently stored at operating and shut-down sites. 75 sites in 33 states, 90,000 metric tons, and counting. 64 dry casks in this illustration. Nuclear power plant sites restarts. Currently 94 operating plants. Palisades in Michigan will be number 95. 3 Mile Island 1 in Pennsylvania will be number 96. Nuclear Waste Policy Act, NWPA, Overview. Purpose: supports deep geologic repositories for safe storage/disposal of radioactive waste. Site evaluation: establishes procedures for selecting repository sites and defines state-federal government interactions. Amendments: designate Yucca Mountain as the primary site for the first repository. Restrict DOE from exploring a second site without congressional approval. Require a report on the need for a second repository by January 1, 2010. Establish a commission to study monitored retrievable storage facility feasibility. Responsibilities: DOE. Site, build, and operate deep geologic repositories for high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel. EPA. Develop standards to protect the environment from radioactive releases. NRC. License DOE to operate repositories if they meet EPA standards and other requirements. We have options. Deep geologic storage, still the law of the land. Concept identified in the 1950s. Other countries are making progress. Consolidated interim storage, 2012. Blue Ribbon Commission recommended consolidated interim storage facilities paired with a collaborative siting process. Finland's Deep Geologic Repository. Source: POSIVA. What is consolidated interim storage? Relocates the spent nuclear fuel from 75 sites to just a handful of sites until repository is built. Benefits: fulfills, in part, contractual obligation of federal government to nuclear plant owners. Reduces financial burden on the federal government. Allows land at shut-down nuclear plants to be repurposed. Creates long-term jobs for local communities. Examples of dry casks. How much space is needed? A nuclear fuel dry storage cask is typically a steel cylinder designed to hold spent nuclear fuel. The cask is about 19 feet in height and 8 feet in diameter. It can hold approximately 10 to 15 metric tons of spent fuel, which is equivalent to about 32 PWR or 68 BWR used fuel assemblies. Assume a separation of about 8 feet between casks, and the total square footage needed is about 1/2 acre for 80 casks, the footprint for 2 typical home lots. Prairie Island plants in Minnesota. In February 2024, Xcel Energy applied for a certificate of need to expand dry cask storage at the Prairie Island units. The additional storage would allow for continued operation of the plant to 2054. According to the Star Tribune, Xcel already has 50 casks of spent fuel, expansion plans for 15 more casks under their current license, and will need an additional 34 casks and 2 concrete pads to store waste for 20 more years of operation. The final EIS was released by the Minnesota Department of Commerce in February of 2025. The PUC approved the Prairie Island nuclear plan to extend operations through the early 2050s in August 2025. Interim storage sites. Current storage is at each nuclear power plant site. Casks would be moved from the mini NPP sites to large single sites. Proposals for interim storage sites are being evaluated/licensed. One site being evaluated is in Andrews County, Texas, another near Hobbs, New Mexico. Each will hold about 1/3 to 1/2 of all used fuel. Many concerns, including transportation safety. The process. Pick up spent fuel from nuclear plant sites, transport by specially designed rail car, deliver to consolidated interim storage facility. Spent nuclear fuel transportation. Decades of experience moving spent nuclear fuel in the U.S. and internationally. Rail, truck, ship. Radioactive materials carried inside large, robust, sealed metal casks that provide confinement and shielding. Strictly regulated by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC. No one has ever been harmed due to a release of radiation during transportation of spent nuclear fuel. Deep Geologic Repository. The choice of countries worldwide. U.S. has studied Yucca Mountain, Nevada as potential location. Long-term, deep burial, Yucca Mountain. Waste packaging. (100 miles northwest of Las Vegas). Deep burial, other countries. France, Sweden, Canada, Spain, Finland. Reprocessing. Chemically separate long-lived radioactive material from used fuel to minimize long-term storage volume needs. Recover remaining fuel, uranium and plutonium, for use in future reactors. Has been done in France since near the beginning of their nuclear program development. Rejected in the U.S. because of weapons proliferation concerns. Currently being reconsidered in the U.S. and Korea. Secondary issue is it may be more expensive than mining fresh uranium. Fuel consumption in the reactor. Fuel in reactor for 4 to 6 years. Uranium-235 consumed. Fission products and transuranic produced. Pu-239 is a transuranic. Fuel recycling/reprocessing. Reprocessing. World commercial reprocessing capacity. New reprocessing technology and transmutation. The U.S. is currently researching other than Purex reprocessing technologies. Reduce cost. Improve proliferation resistance. U.S. Department of Energy, DOE, Advanced Research Projects Agency Energy, ARPA-E, announced $40 million program to pursue transmutation technologies. This would reduce the impact of used nuclear fuel, UNF, in permanent storage facilities. ARPA-E's Nuclear Energy Waste Transmutation Optimized Now, Newton program, will pursue transmutation technologies to significantly reduce the mass, volume, activity, and effective half-life of the existing stockpile of commercial UNF. Alternative disposal method. Deep Borehole Deep Isolation Inc. has proposed the use of deep borehole for disposal of commercial nuclear waste. Disposal at great depth, 3 kilometers, under billions of tons of rock. Reducing environment at depth strongly inhibits canister corrosion. Inherent properties of proposed rock formations limit mobility of most radionuclides. Impact of small modular reactors, SMRs. Small is not really small. Concept is increased safety and possible factory module construction. Today's legacy plants are typically 1,000 megawatts. SMRs are typically 300 plus megawatts. Installed in clusters on a single site, amount of used nuclear fuel per megawatt is effectively the same. Possibly lower total volume due to possible higher enrichments. Net result is more used fuel because there simply will be more reactors.